everybody, welcome back to my channel. Hope everyone is doing well today. So here in a couple of days, April will begin, and so will begin my Spring into Classics readathon that is going through the months of April and May this year. In this reading challenge, readathon, read-along thing, I'm hoping to inspire people to pick up some classics where they may not have done so before or not in a long time, maybe a little intimidated. This reading event is all about reading classics and starting to read classics if you are new to them. So I thought that it would be, if you want more information on that reading event, look in the description box. I got a link down there for you. But I thought that it would be good to put together a video of some classics that I would recommend if you are just beginning and you find that you have just been bored with classics. Maybe there's just, the language is too flowery, or there's just too much, or there's too much backstory, or it's just difficult to get into. The books I'm going to share with you today, I feel like you can get right into. They keep your attention. They keep the story moving. They're interesting. Some of them are very relatable to our time. And I think that they are great starter classics. There isn't anything in here that is super flowery, over-the-top romantic, or anything like that. So I think that they will appeal to most anyone. That's super basic. I mean, they're just kind of like across the board, interesting, good stories. So I think I have 12 here. So let's get into that right now. The first one that I finished just last night, the Hopkins manuscript by R.C. Sheriff. This one was such a fantastic book. I am still just kind of floored with how much I enjoyed this. This was published in the late 1930s, in between the war times, right before World War II started. And the idea of the story is just fantastic, but the events, I think we could parallel with the events of World War I. There was in between sort of picking up and trying to fix everything years, and then World War II. The book has a super modern feel to it. I basically spent every available moment from the time I picked it up until the time I finished it reading it. I was very engaged. It felt like somebody from our day was writing it just about things in the past. It took place in the 1940s, but in a very dystopian 1940s. So basically in this story, there is a man called Edgar who is extremely arrogant. He's pretty obnoxious, but he does become lovable super fast. Well, he is a member of the British Lunar Society, and he is called to a meeting of this society to find out that the moon is falling. It's falling toward the Earth, and they give a specific date at which the moon will have fallen to the Earth. This guy, Edgar, is writing his journals. That's what the book is the whole thing is his journals, and it's a really fun and interesting story that you can actually take as far as you want to. Like, if you like conspiracy theories, there's all kinds of stuff in here, like mud floods and the Great Reset and agendas 20s, 30s and things like that. There's lots of parallels to things that we are looking at right now today. But again, it also parallels back to the times of the First and Second World War. So anyway, I would highly recommend the Hopkins manuscript. You will be reading a classic. Like I said, it's from the 1930s. It's almost 100 years old, but it is super fantastic, super modern, extremely relevant. I would highly suggest and urge you to go grab this book. All right, next up is one of my favorite books of all time. This is Time and Again by Jack Finney. Now, for purposes of this particular video, I'm calling a classic anything from 1970 or earlier. I know that it gets under the skin of some of you all. I was born in 1979, so I don't personally feel like 1970s, across the board are classics, but I do think that there are some classic things from the 70s, 60s, 50s that can be called classics, even if everything written during those times cannot. Where something like, everything written from the Victorian times we might call a classic. Maybe I should make a whole video on the determinations for what we should call a classic. But you got to remember, guys, those of us who have a real problem with the 70s being classic eras are forgetting that there are people in their 20s and early 30s watching this channel as well. and they may see it differently. So anyway, 1970 before, time and again. This is not just a time travel book, it is like a time capsule. The main character, Cy, starts out in the 1960s. He lives in New York. And he has the opportunity to time travel back to the 1880s. The interesting thing about this book, as opposed to a lot of other time travel books, is that he is able to make some significant emotional and personal changes to the timeline without actually changing the timeline of history. And that's, of course, what they are all trying to avoid, right? And so, but he really has some very deep and personal experiences in this, earlier timeline without it making a big, historical impact. One of the things that I love about this book is that it features a lot of photography from early New York. It's definitely a love letter to the city of New York and people that are familiar with it and that love it. He uses those photographs and then tells stories about, what they really were taken for, who really lived there, what was really going on. There's early artwork in here. There are actual photographs of people, and then he kind of makes up a story about them. Here are some photographs from newspapers of the time that he uses in here. The whole story is fictional, but he uses things that would be familiar to New Yorkers to tell this story. I've never been to New York. I've never even been to the New England area other than the airports, but I fell in love with New York reading this book. If you're looking for a classic time travel story, definitely pick this up. Time and Again by Jack Finney. There are sequels, but this one, the first one, it's the best. All right, third up is this classic called Looking Backward, 2000 to 1887 by Edward Bellamy. This book sort of set a precedent and is the story that a lot of sci-fi and time travel books kind of pull from in their storytelling. It was the most widely read novel of its time, and it tells the story of a guy who travels to the future, but unlike a lot of the futuristic time travel books that we read, instead of it going from better to worse, it actually goes from worse to better. The main character of this book leaves the late 19th century, a time of war and chaos and crazy and lacking hope. He time travels to the year 2000, where the world has learned how to be at peace. The world has learned how to get along. They have fantastic technologies that make their lives easier and better. And it's basically a utopia. Isn't that so disappointing? Poor Edward Bellamy would be quite disappointed in us, wouldn't he? We're all longing to go back to the 1880s, while he thought that the 2000s would be so much better. Anyway, this is I love reading stories like that, right? Where we see how earlier eras of history thought about our current era and the hope they had for us. And it just makes you feel kind of ashamed. Anyway, I think you guys will really enjoy this time travel book as well. It's an easy read. It's a fun read. And it's fun to imagine and see how much he actually got right, because there are some things that he did get right. Next up is a standalone novel, but it is the first in a series about the main character. So you could just read this and be done, or you could continue on. And that is The 39 Steps by John McCann. This was published in 1915. I read this several years ago and was pleasantly surprised. It is not normally my type of a book, but I found myself very engaged, and I think I just sat and read it in one sitting. The main character of this book is an adventurer. He was just in South Africa, and he's come back to the UK. He's living in London, and he meets up with somebody who has some state secrets that could prove to be very detrimental to Europe. And so he gets sort of mixed up in all of this innocently, to the point where he becomes a fugitive, wanted for a crime he did not commit. And so he flees to Scotland, which is where he's actually from, and the story is all about him sort of just running, trying to stay one step ahead from the authorities until he can get to a place where he can clear his name. It's very funny. It's very engaging. There's just enough detail to keep your attention and to help you picture everything in your head without going over the top. It's a fairly short book. My copy here is about 140 pages. It is a fantastic story. And if you like reading about the main character's adventures, like I said, there are more books written after this one about his adventures. But the 39 Steps is probably the most popular one. And like I said, is the first in the series. So check that out if you're interested. All right, for this next one, we're going to go all the way back to the Regency era to 1790 for A Sicilian Romance by Anne Radcliffe. Now, this one is more challenging than the three I just mentioned, just only because of the language. Sometimes the language can get a little... it's 1790, right? So they're going to talk a little bit different than we do now. It's not anything I feel like the average, reader couldn't understand. And I don't think it's going to hold anybody back. It's not flowery. It's not dramatic and over the top compared to a lot of other things from that era, at least. But the story is so fun. It's so engaging. If you are looking for kind of a gothic feel, something not necessarily spooky, but unsettling in places, Anne Radcliffe is kind of the queen of the Gothic, especially classic Gothic novels. This one is set in Sicily. There's a castle. There's a mystery. There is hidden places and hidden things, and lots of being on the run and suspense and a few moments of terror. It's just got all the stuff. It is such a great story. I really, really enjoyed this. Anne Radcliffe also wrote settings really well, so you get some really beautiful descriptions of setting and nature and things. And I just think that it was such an imaginative story. So highly recommend A Sicilian Romance. It's not a romance in the sense of what we would think of like romantic. It's that's a term that was used more for like a drama, right? An adventurous drama. Something that featured a lot of emotion and stirred emotion. Something that could have been quite sensational, a little edgy. That was a little bit better description for the word romance during Anne Radcliffe's time. So don't get hung up if you're not a romance reader. It's not a romance. It's an adventure story with a whole lot of Gothic elements. Next up is another adventurous sort of story. This is The Prisoner of Zenda by Anthony Hope. This one was published in 1898. It is a very slim book. I read this in one sitting as well, and it really kept my attention just because it's a fast-moving story. The main character in this story ends up going to another country called Ruritania, and he comes in contact with someone who looks just like him. It happens to be the next guy in line to be the king of the country. But his life is in danger, the future kings, and so this guy, who is just having a happy little vacation to Ruritania, ends up taking on the identity of him, poses as that guy, Rudolph, so that he can go into hiding and they can find a way to, take care of the threat, and then he can come into his rightful place as king. So the book has a lot of humor. It has a lot of fighting, sword fighting, plenty of killing. It has a romance. It has all of the things that you would imagine in a swashbuckling adventure in less than 200 pages. It's not my usual fare, but I loved it and I am so glad I read it. And again, it has sequels as well if you find that you really want to read more about these characters. Next, I have a couple of mysteries. They're Sherlock Holmes mysteries. Up until just a couple of years ago, I had never read any Sherlock Holmes mysteries. I hadn't read anything by Conan Doyle. And so I first picked up Hound of the Baskervilles. I found it to be an easy read. Again, it's a slim read. I don't even think this one's 100 pages. And it tells a story about a family who has been haunted by some demon hounds for generations. And so Sherlock Holmes helps rid them of them. And then the next story is A Study in Scarlet. And this one actually takes place mostly in Utah, which I found to be fun because the area in which he's describing is an area in which I'm familiar. And so that was just kind of fun to imagine them. It is definitely a product of its time, so there is no political correctness when it comes to the people of Utah, and particularly the groups of Mormons that had settled there. So just be aware of that. But I really enjoyed the story. It was fast moving and fun and an interesting read. A good introduction to the Sherlock Holmes stories for me, for sure. Next up is one of my very favorite books. This is Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. The main character of this story, he makes a deal, a bet with friends that he could travel the world in 80 days all the way around the world. And so he has to be back in the company of his friends by a certain time on a certain date to, win this bet. And so it tells about his travels around the world, and it is so fun. All the different countries that he encounters and the different people and the things that kind of get in his way and cause, delays and different things. And you're really on the edge of your seat hoping, right, that he can make his goal. This was published in 1873 and it's translated. So if you're interested, if you've never read a translated work before, this would be a good one. I believe Jules Verne was French, so I think it was translated from French. Anyway, great story. Next is one that surprised me because I didn't think that I liked this classic author. And that is The Prince and the Pauper by Mark Twain. So I, throughout my childhood and teen years, had tried to read, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. They never appealed to me. I did not enjoy those stories. I did not enjoy the setting. I didn't enjoy anything. And again, that was before I moved to the South. So I might enjoy them more now than I did then, but they just were never for me. So when I picked up A Prince and the Pauper a few years ago, I was a little cautious, but it was a story that I did want to read. It was set during Tudor times, and I thought maybe it might be a little different, and it was. It was totally different, and I loved it. So it tells the story of a young boy who finds himself accidentally switched with the young prince. And so the prince goes to live as a pauper and the pauper gets to live as a prince. And so it tells both boys' stories and how they are seeing the world from different perspectives. I just thought that it had a lot of elements in it. I think that traditionally this is thought of as a children's story, but I think it had a lot of elements that were very relevant to adults. And I can't see why an adult could not enjoy this story. I mean, I did when I was like 43 or so. I loved it. But it is a quick read, and most people kind of already know the basic gist of the story, right? There's been lots of recreations of this story. So if you are trying to get into a classic, maybe reading something whose storyline you are already familiar with will help keep your attention and help you to enjoy it. And in that same vein, reading stories that you are somewhat familiar with, one story that I love is Pinocchio by Carlo Collodi. This is the original story of Pinocchio, the puppet who eventually, he wants to be a boy, and he wants to be a real boy, and he has all kinds of adventures that basically prove that he is, right? Different adventures about conscience, different lessons in conscience and morals and love and things like that. But it's a really fun read, and again, a product of its time, but a great story, really. I read this to my kids several years ago, and we all really loved it. The story of Pinocchio was originally published in 1882, and it also is a translated story, translated from Italian. And finally, I have this duology that was published in the very early 20th century, like the 19-teens, and that is Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster, and then its sequel called Dear Enemy. Both of these stories are told in the form of letters. They are epistolary novels, and they are really fun and sweet reads. If you're looking for something that, might appeal a little bit more to girls or women, this is definitely a good pick. So the story of Daddy Longlegs is basically there's this girl named Jerusha. She lives in an orphanage. And one day, someone comes to the orphanage and wants to sponsor one of the orphans to go to school. And so Jerusha is the one who is chosen. So when she finds this out, she kind of goes down to sort of spy out the situation and see who is down there, who is this benefactor. All she can see is the shadow of the man, and his legs are elongated, and, you know, the way the shadow is, the way his, you know, body is casting his shadow on the floor. And so his legs look super long. And so she calls him Daddy Longlegs. This man does not know Jerusha. She does not know him. But the only requirement that he has is that she would write him on a regular basis and give him updates about her time at school. And so that's what this book is. It is her letters to Daddy Longlegs, telling about her time at school, full of lots of cute drawings and lots of fun stories about school days in the 19 teens. And then, like I said, there is a sequel, Dear Enemy. This also is written as letters, but instead it is letters between friends. So one of the friends is Jerusha, and they just correspond about things that I can't tell you because they'd be spoilers to the first book. So if you like epistolary books or you want to try one out, those are great picks for that genre. And also, like I said, quick and easy reads, just to get you kind of a feel for classic times, but not necessarily something that you're going to spend weeks on trying to slog through. I don't really think any of these books are slogs, really, so I hope that if you try some of these out that you will feel the same. I think they are all great starter books, but also, you know, great reads for classic readers at any level, whether you've been reading them for years or you're just starting out. Let me know if you want to give some of these a try. Which of these sound interesting to you? Have you read any of them? And I just hope that this is a helpful and fun video for you guys. Have a great day, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.